Nature Deficit Disorder by Eric, Catalina, and Noah.
In this presentation, we will be discussing the précis, a brief summary of the article and what the article does, the author's argument, who Meg Tanis-Bree McKivigan is and the argument she makes, our personal thesis, the purpose of the article and the rhetorical devices used, rhetorical analysis, the device used and how they work to support the purpose, personal opinions, how we feel the article was written, being generous and critical, and finally, conclusions and citations, the presentation summary and the citation slide.
So we're going to start with the article précis. We are introduced to a Brooklyn family with two small children that face the struggle of little green space, depending on city parks for exposure to nature. The pandemic has made using these parks unsafe, which makes the children act erratically. The pandemic has made the necessity of nature for children more apparent than ever, increasing public awareness of the deep human need for connection. Essentially, the less time young people spend outdoors, the more their senses narrow. Richard Louv, a nonfiction journalist and author, calls this nature deficit disorder, a non-medical condition suggesting that less time outdoors contributes to behavioral changes in children. Access to green space is also dependent on economic status and race, observing how wealthier streets have more greenery and parks, and how segregated housing may divide this wealth. The takeaway is for parents to remember that consistent time in nature, or downtime in general, is essential for the well-being and mental health of their children.
The author, Meg Tanis-Bree McKivigan, is a freelance American journalist who has written for news sites such as the New York Times, The Independent, The Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, and various other big names. McKivigan writes about education, culture, parenting, and adoption, making her an experienced writer within the topics of family and children. She is a mother herself of 4 young children, indicating a personal connection with the text, also suggesting that she has passions upon the topic of children's health. McKivigan's audience is other parents and guardians like herself, as she concludes the article with reminders to prioritize children's time with nature, as it plays a crucial role in a child's development.
The author's argument. Meg Tanis-Bree McKivigan claims that nature deficit disorder is a term used to describe the behavioral changes in children caused by an alienation from nature. The disorder makes children more irritable and moody, an issue that was heightened by the green space restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Parents must provide consistent access to green spaces for their children's development in order to prevent nature deficit disorder from affecting their children's mental health. Overall, the article follows a theme of mental health, focusing on children due to their sensitive developing years and how a problem such as nature deficit disorder may affect them more than it would adults.
Our personal thesis. In Meg Tanis-Bree McKivigan's article, Nature Deficit Disorder is Really a Thing, McKivigan stresses the importance of nature in the mental development of children. Her use of academic and personal ethos constructs her authority over the topic, which, coupled with parallel structure, allows her to effectively persuade the audience while maintaining digestibility. The author also utilizes pathos through relatability to evoke feelings of empathy, further reinforcing the notion that nature is a fundamental part of the well-being and development of children.
Our rhetorical analysis will start with ethos, which argues the legitimacy of nature deficit disorder by using professional authority alongside first-hand experiences to establish the credibility of the author's information. We will then move to parallelism, which is used to simplify more complex ideas, switching between narrative and research-based data. And we'll finally end on pathos, which is used to relate to the reader as well as evoke empathy. McKivigan deploys a strong sense of ethos to gain the trust of the reader and argue the legitimacy of nature deficit disorder. She achieves this through using the authority of professionals along with personal experiences of worried parents to establish the credibility of her information. For example, in her introduction to the article, McKivigan uses LaToya Jordan, a mother of 2 young children in New York, to establish the reality of how children are behaving in reaction to the pandemic restrictions. McKivigan states, Jordan, 42, has observed a distinct change in her children's well-being after having little to no access to green space. Both of them are more moody and cranky, she said. McKivigan, 2. The author's word choice in this excerpt communicates a sense of urgency to the reader with the words distinct and little to no access. These descriptors show that children's alienation from nature is a growing problem which has a noticeable effect on children, making the issue a critical one. The quote from Latoya Jordan proves this claim as it provides a first-hand testimony of a worried mother's observations, showing how nature deficit disorder manifests in children's external mannerisms. Jordan describes her children as moody and cranky, indicating how their lack of access to nature is having a detrimental effect on the way they act. By using a testimony of someone who is watching the effects of nature deficit disorder firsthand, McKivigan establishes the fact of a real change in children's behavior due to their lack of access to nature. Being the introduction to the article, Latoya Jordan's experience presents the idea of nature deficit disorder as a reality rather than a claim. Additionally, McKivigan references research and various experts in the field of children's mental health and nature's effect on said health throughout the article. One of these experts is Rebecca Hirschberg, a psychologist working in childhood social emotional development and mental health. McKivigan quotes Dr. Hirschberg, "Prioritizing time in nature, exercise, and even some unstructured downtime is analogous to prioritizing our children's mental health, which is more important now than ever." Dr. Hirschberg asserts that a child's regular experience with nature directly parallels their mental development, supporting the legitimacy of nature deficit disorder and the importance of its public awareness. By using Dr. Hirschberg's voice, Dr. McKivigan provides the reader a trustworthy source to support her argument, persuading the reader as her stance lies on the backings of a psychologist specializing in the field of children's mental health. Though McKivigan herself has little expertise on the neurological science behind nature deficit disorder, using Dr. Hirschberg to present her point allows it to nevertheless come across with credibility and persuasiveness. In all, the author uses academic ethos alongside perspective-based ethos to support the legitimacy of nature deficit disorder, effectively making her argument reliable and trustworthy. McKivigan presents these two types of ethos by alternating between them, contributing to a parallel structure found throughout the article.
Throughout the article, McKivigan uses this parallelism to simplify more complex ideas and make them more digestible for the reader. Frequently switching between narrative and research-based data, McKivigan uses parallelism as a bridge between the intricacy of nature deficit disorder and parents who are unfamiliar or susceptible. On page 2, for example, McKivigan writes, Jordan, 42, has observed a distinct change in her children's well-being after having little to no access to green space. She then goes on to say how numerous studies have shown the mental and physical benefits of spending time in nature, but for some people, it took a pandemic and stay-at-home orders for that desire to spend more time outdoors to feel like a necessity. This abrupt change in topic creates a stark contrast within her writing, which creates a sense of relatability with her readers. As a middle-aged mother herself, McKivigan knows of her audience, parents looking for ways to benefit their children, and is able to manipulate them through describing shared experiences like the pandemic. McKivigan uses the pandemic to educate parents about the reality of nature deficit disorder, highlighting how much more common the disorder has become and how parents, just like them, are facing the same issue unknowingly. Secondly, on page 3, McKivigan states, Kiona Gardner, 41, suspects her two boys, ages 9 and 12, are showing symptoms of what Louvre has coined nature deficit disorder. They are stressed and anxious, Gardner says. Research has shown access to green space is linked to a child's well-being. For example, adding greenery to school play yards has been shown to increase pro-social behavior in children. This example targets parents with older children who have been pulled out of school to learn from home, serving as a reason to the question many parents have, why are my kids so stressed? The answer lies in the fact that little to no nature present in the lives of children can greatly diminish their mental health. The point of this example is to help parents parent, or to better understand a certain aspect of their child so they can use to meet the emotional needs of said children. This sense of relatability McKivigan creates with parallelism is used to simplify complex concepts in these scenarios, and is used to educate parents and answer their questions. Being relatable ties into the emotion of parents and children, which brings us to our third and final analysis of how pathos is used.
The author appeals to the reader's sense of pathos by consistently prioritizing the sentimental effect that nature deficit disorder has on children, as well as focusing on the personal struggles of the parents. This allows the author to target her audience of parents more effectively, as she is able to relate to them on a more personal level, as well as evoke feelings of empathy through relatability. Firstly, the author describes how a mother worries about her children and their future, a feeling shared by many parents who could potentially be reading the article. She quotes, "I started to worry about the long-term impact on them. In the city, they hold their breath when anybody walks by us. In the suburbs, they were able to relax." By explaining how the mother worries about her children and their future, a feeling shared by all parents, the author draws on the emotional perspective of her target audience. Through this, the author builds relatability, increasing the sentimental investment of the reader, as well as allowing the reader to connect with the argument on a more personal level. Secondly, when describing the effect nature deficit disorder has on children, a concerned mother states, "Both of them are moody and cranky. My 8-year-old is so jealous of her friends who have a backyard right now." In this example, the mother describes the negative effects that nature deficit disorder can have on the mental health of children. This is an effective way of using pathos, as the author incites empathy from her target audience, who as parents have a uniquely personal connection with the example. Furthermore, by describing the emotional effects of nature deficit disorder from the child's perspective, the author highlights the emotional vulnerability of children, further inciting the reader's feelings of empathy and concern. In all, this allows the reader to view the author's argument sentimentally and empathetically. In conclusion, the author uses pathos to connect personally with the reader. She achieves this by highlighting relatable feelings as well as building empathy for the negative effects of nature deficit disorder.
So I now like to talk about our personal opinions. In my personal opinion, I like to give credit where credit is due. I believe the article is very well written, from the structure to the rhetorical devices used. The article's use of colloquial diction also made it easy to understand and analyze. Overall, the article felt effective, communicating to parents that nature is essential for the betterment of their children. The only flaw in the article that I saw was the quote that ended the concluding paragraph. Although it was effective in providing solutions, I felt it was anticlimactic because it lacked a firm final stance. The conclusion does link back to the thesis, but does so boringly by depending on the work of an outside analyst.
In my opinion, while this article is well written, I find the parallel structure repetitive and boring. The continuous use of the same structure feels stale by the end of the article, but is effective at presenting the author's argument in an organized, albeit boring way. In addition, the lack of a counter-argument allows the reader to poke many holes in the author's stance. This glaring flaw heavily reduces the strength of her argument and is definitely a missed opportunity. Finally, the lack of formality weakens the scientific aspect of the author's argument, although its colloquial tone is well suited for its target audience.
Contrary to Eric, I think the article has an interesting parallel structure that gives the reader both the logical and real-lived perspective on the situation. I like this structure because it makes McKivigan's article well-rounded, providing both voices like two sides of the same coin. Being able to relate to the article, even though I myself am not a small young child, also made the reading enjoyable, and I saw how I could apply the idea of nature deficit disorder to my own life, especially during recent years. However, despite my interest, I would have liked to read more about the factors that go into a child's access to green space. Near the end of the article, McKivigan references Dr. Ming Kuo, who touches on how wealth and race play into a child's access to nature. But this subject was never expanded upon. I would have really liked to see this comparison between different situations children may be subject to, because I believe it's a very important part to consider when dealing with the topic of children and the opportunities they may or may not have.
In summary, Meg St. Esprit McKivigan's article, Nature Deficit Disorder Is Really a Thing, argues the legitimacy of the disorder and spreads awareness on the issue. She does this by using academic and observation-based ethos, parallel structure, and relatable pathos to persuade the reader of nature's crucial role in developing a child's mental health. Here I have our works cited, where we reference the article and the website we used, and with that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.